Now, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now, that couldn't be more true of right now. The pandemic has changed the world forever, and there is no playbook on how to navigate the next normal. As key account managers, we can't look to the past to figure out how to partner with our clients in the future. So what do? Fail. Fail often, fail fast, and fail cheap. It's the only way to figure it out. Are you up for that? I know a lot of us are scared. What if I make a mistake? What if my client calls me out? What if my boss, rips me to shreds? In this episode of Key Account Management in Action podcast, returning guest Phil Bourne and I chat about why and how key account managers should embrace failure for more productive and authentic relationships with their clients as we emerge from the pandemic. I hope you enjoy. Welcome back, Phil Bourne. So excited to have you as a return guest to Account Management in Action. Famous for the tenets of account management, one of the most watched videos from this series on my channel. So couldn't wait to have you back. So welcome, Phil. And today we're going to be talking about the fear of failure. So let's get into it.
Hi, Warren. Thank you for having me back. Yeah, fear of failure. This is interesting. This started with me as I get older, because it's a shock to see that I'm not 17 anymore.
What? I won't believe it.
Yes. I die this to get empathy with customers. Yeah, like Billy. So I'm in a sort of unique position because I've been doing this for a long time, 30 years type stuff. I'm in an interesting place to review things, and it suddenly struck me literally recently. I was watching some stuff online and listening to some sales success podcasts, and I've suddenly thought about another guiding tenet that we didn't think about, and it's amazing. I'm going to ask you a fundamental question. There are a tiny list of things we don't talk about, the humans, bereavement, and I'm trying to think of what else, and failure. We never talk about personal or professional failure, ever. You and I would meet for dinner, and all we talk about is our war stories, is our successes or funny things involved with that. Not our abject failure, heart-wrenching. And I suddenly thought, why not? Why don't we do this? And then suddenly I started to analyze my career, and a lot of what has driven me is failure. Yeah. I've learned from failure. I've grown from failure.
What's interesting is that I think particularly in business and also in account management sales, where it's always spoken about in terms of battles or races. We're going to
crushing your enemies.
We're going to crush that client. We're going to win this business. We're going to tackle that problem. There's always that that metaphor of it's going to the battlefield dressing up in armor, and we don't want to. When we're defeated, it feels. Well, when we fail, it feels like defeat, I should say. Not necessarily something to be learned from, but potentially something to be ashamed of or embarrassed about, or something that we very quickly. I've had this so many times, when you get told you haven't won the business or the client's leaving and you haven't been able to convince them to stay. And then you all lament it. You're like, oh, we could have done this and we could have done that. And then they start pointing fingers. And then within a week, everyone's blaming the customer. Oh, they were terrible. They were never a good fit for us anyway. Oh, glad to see the back of them. They were an awful customer. And we suddenly move away from that very brief moment where we had an opportunity to look at why we didn't win, why we weren't successful in achieving that goal, to shifting the blame and moving on. What do you think?
Definitely. It's so easy to then blame the customer. But the reality is you lost it, or we lost it. There was something that didn't happen. Communication, pricing, tech spec. We didn't corrupt the bases. Who are they owned by? Now it's very easy to say, oh, that decision was made in Madrid.
Yeah.
Right. And it's very easy to say that. Well, my action is, why, if we knew that, why didn't we go to Madrid?
Yeah.
Why didn't we? Or wind up our Spanish people? Who do we know? What and why? What could we have done? And sometimes there's some things you can't do. You are going to lose stuff. The reality is stuff.
Oh.
Now, and it comes back to the resilience. My grandfather gave me a cracking piece of advice about 30 million years ago. And he was a people person. He played one of the tenants. Yeah, he played the person, not the game. He taught me that. And he said, life will knock you down every time, personally, professionally. And it's how you get up.
Yeah.
It's how you get up. It's how you get up. And getting up is important. And part of the process is, why did we fall down? What did we do? And every time that's happened to me, I have learned things about myself, the company, the process, invaluable lessons, more than succeeding.
Some people might say they were pushed, but honestly, the more I think about it, like even if you fail, there's always a role that you played in that happening. Now, whether or not you were aware of it, you may not have been at the time, but the point is to be able to reflect and go, okay, looking back, I can see this is where I probably could have done something differently, and I'm going to sort of embed that into next time. What do you think? So one of the things, and I agree with you, fall down 7 times, get up 8, I mean, it's literally, perseverance alone, you'll be the last man standing, because so many people just give up and move on to something else. But one thing I was thinking about yesterday is I was having a conversation inside the Camp Club, which is my community for account managers, learning community for account managers. And the topic was what to do when clients leave. One of the things that came up for me was, I'm terrified to tell my boss. A client calls you and says, oh, Warwick, we're leaving. We're not happy, or we've thought about it. Thanks for the proposal, but we're still going to go anyway. And I was like, my first reaction when we were having this conversation would be, I would need to strategize the conversation with my boss. I'd need to sugarcoat it. I might need to do some homework. I might need to embellish or, diminish some of the conversations so that he didn't fly off the handle, or she didn't lose it, or suddenly they weren't pointing fingers at me and making me feel like it was all my fault. So what do you think about that? Like, do you think there's enough of a safe culture or a safe environment created in organizations or teams to be able to embrace a bit of that failure and to explore it? And if there isn't, what do you think people can do to make it safer or encourage it?
One of the things that always crosses my mind is they're going to know anyway, right?
Yeah, sooner or later.
And it's more important that first of all, you have it once the clock's ticking. Warwick, we're going to pull out. The clock is ticking before that revenue disappears, the letter arrives, email gets filtered up.
Yeah.
So your boss is going to, will find out, and it's a tight time frame.
Yeah.
Right? The problem is, if you spin something, it will seem like it's spinned.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then you could imagine, well, they were never going to go with us. It was only a 2-year deal. We screwed them on the T's and C's. We screwed them on price. I did warn you about this. And it's all this, rather than, it's like I'm a great fan of you tell the truth in real time. Not that it will set you free. It's just an easy thing to remember.
Yeah.
Reality is they've lost. I've just got off the phone. Tell the facts as you see it. If they explode, why are they exploding?
I heard an expression today which I really like. Lies have short legs; they always get caught. And I thought that's brilliant. And so there's literally no point trying to spin into something it isn't. But I do think it's important to have a moment just to think about how you're going to approach it. Don't go screaming and going, oh my God, we've lost this account.
That would be true though, Warwick, if I may, of every phone call.
Yeah.
I've got like you, I've got a raft of things to do today, right? But I took 15 minutes out to jot some notes in, which is
another. Them too.
English is so hard.
English as a first language, it's tough.
my Italian's much better. I took 10 or 15 minutes to put some notes down. And yes, take a moment, but put down the facts and just tell the facts. You can't say, because every case is going to be different, but you want to mitigate it, right? This is going to happen right now. And so the reality is we have a chunk of revenue missing from 2021. What we're going to do right now. Okay, we've got 40% hole because of this account going. We've got a 40% hole in the revenue, right? We need to bring this in Q3 and Q4 because already you're giving him or her the landscape, trying out the problem.
Yeah.
Now, so I haven't got a solution yet. I've just got off the phone. So the reality is we've got a 40% hole in our revenue Q3, Q4. Okay, I'm now going to go away and I'm going to think about it.
Yeah,
explode anyway. But the point is already you're setting the seeds of an idea. And then also you'd have to do it anyway. 40%, Q3, Q4, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
How do we do this? And already, and then they'll say, didn't you say this? Maybe, don't know yet. Can you give me 3 days? I'm going to sketch some ideas out.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to some people. That's a sign of hope. It's a sign of hope. Maybe it's playing for time. But it's what you would do anyway.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. How do I do this?
Yeah, good advice. So I think what you're saying is there's always ways that you can repivot. You can find ways to mitigate the impact. You can learn the lesson from it. You can do your best to make sure it doesn't happen again. And you can acknowledge that it happened, the role that you played in that situation, and then just do your best to kind of either fix it or learn the lesson from it, either way. So let's pivot to more of the kind of future forward stuff. And one of the challenges that I've come across a lot is people still afraid to experiment, to try new ideas as account managers, not wanting to rock the boat. There is that really almost I wanted to say pathological, just not the right word, but very where you're treading that balance, especially now between revenue. Businesses are hurting, revenue is tight. Some businesses are booming, of course, but there are others, probably more of them, that are struggling. Nobody wants to lose a customer. The idea of trying to innovate or do something a little bit different can be terrifying for some account managers.
Absolutely.
But there is no script for where we are today. So if you're not innovating, if you're not being, if you're afraid to fail, if you're not going to pursue something a little bit different, what are you doing? You can't play the playbook like you did in 2017 or flip the script. There is no script. You've got to write it. So that means failing along with it while you're figuring ideas out. What do you think?
Another good question. Again, the fear of failure. And this comes back to what we do, again, not talking about it. The fear of failure can paralyze you. I'm in a meeting. I'm not sure I agree with this strategy, but it's a Zoom meeting and I don't really want to say it because it's just a lonely voice. And it's Phil Bourne going on again about... Well, there might be something to that. I mean, my father's career was predicated. This was a lesson he taught me about power of failure and never be afraid about a minority voice. If you believe you're right, his career was predicated that everybody in a meeting would agree on the strategy for Argentina for 2022, and it was about to sign off, and he'd say, why will it work when it didn't work in Colombia in 2018? What have we changed? And people go, oh.
You know what? I asked my GM that once about something, and he was annoyed at me, and that taught me a different lesson about choose when you're going to actually speak. But I said, why do you think this will work when it's never worked before, blah, 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 blah. I got told I was raining on parades and we just need to take a leap of faith sometimes, Warwick. And I'm like, but I get that. I get that sometimes fear of failure also means leaping into the unknown. But also I think when we're talking about some of these things, like you say, okay, well, let's examine. Sometimes you can de-risk failure, if you know what I mean. That's kind of where I was going with that. The opposite of failure isn't being impulsive.
Not at all.
It's actually probably the reverse, the opposite. I mean, it's actually being prepared, foresight, doing your best to plan, build in contingencies, manage risk. So failure, when you think about it in those terms, should only be a small part of the equation. Whereas when you're impulsive, it becomes almost binary. Either I will fail or I will succeed. It's less like that if you're doing more prep.
Exactly. It's the reason I don't bet. The reason I don't bet is I've got an addictive personality. Great. It's the perfect storm. I've got an addictive personality and I don't understand the odds.
Yeah.
If you dismantled horse racing and you've read all the books and you read on the form, it's not betting. There are patterns. I've got some friends who do this. There are patterns. And when you understand it, and it's the same, preparation, the more preparation. If I come to you with reasoned arguments to change a strategy for this year, I did this research. I talked to men. I've got a warm customer. Do you want to come talk to him? That's, just quiet conversation over a virtual lunch or whatever, this and this. And I think this, we've untapped revenue in this. People are only doing this, partly it's this, and it cross reasoned, quiet argument. Why wouldn't you listen? Why wouldn't you listen? Look at all this research I've done. I did it at nights and weekends, particularly if you can get a customer's voice involved or somebody that would give you money for this.
Yeah.
You may be really skeptical, but you're going to give them time.
Yeah.
And the more you're prepared for it, and you're mitigating. It's mitigating failure. So the fear of failure is being mitigated. Recognizing, yes, we could fail. We are gambling. We've never done this before. We might have to buy a company. We have to buy people, right? We have to maybe divert resource from this to do this. But look, what's the potential? And here it is. This is how it looks like.
Yeah, there's no guarantees, but you can certainly draw conclusions based on the past or what you have discovered about what's happening today. And I like the idea of, like inviting your client, talking to the rest of your colleagues, teams to sanity check some of the things that you're thinking about. It doesn't mean that you have to come up exclusively with an idea and it's yours alone to fail at or succeed at. Part of account management is having those informal teams in place, and not just to get things done, but to also make things better and to think about ways to bring more value to your business and your clients.
Exactly. And also to reinforce that, somebody like my father's going to stand up and say, what a really good idea, but it didn't work there. Here's a customer and tell you why it's changed. And then the customer with the right, it will articulate why it's changed. Government regulation, our requirements have changed, marketplace, And the guy goes, fair play.
Yeah. What about failure as in some people, the word in itself sounds so much more consequential than it is. Oh my God, I failed. Versus that didn't work out. You know what I mean? There's something in the language or the way that we express it that it's almost doom and gloom, the option of failing. And that might be a narrative that we need to change in our own mind.
Agreed.
Failure is not catastrophic. Failure just means it did not work out in its current iteration. And,
I mean, really, we ought to entitle this The Courage to Fail. Because it takes courage to change. It's very easy for you and I to sit, particularly now in a Zoom meeting, when the global sales director is rolling out the 2021 or 2022 5-year plan or whatever it is. For you and I to go, it's really easy, isn't it? For you and me, account managers, it's fine. It takes a lot of guts to say, is this the right thing to do? Is it? I've got concerns about this, and this. So the courage to suggest, the courage to fail. It's like Robert Frost's poem, isn't it? Fail better.
Yeah. Fail better, fail faster, fail cheaper.
Fail better. Yeah. That resonates so much with him because it is the courage, but it's
also easy to say, I told you so. It's easy to be the naysayer. It's easy to be the one that says, I don't think it'll work. It's more difficult to be the one that will say, here's why it will work, or here's, I'm not sure it will work like that, but let's talk about how it might work like this, to open the dialogue. But to be the guy or girl, or just the person, I should say, that's always the one, the doom and gloom, like, you know, like cat's bum, we call that. We've got their nose, you know. That's an easy role to play.
It is. But when you say it'll fail, why? Give me. I can't deal. That's flat negativity.
Yeah.
That's flat negativity. That doesn't help.
Yeah.
Now, I hear what you're saying, Warwick, but articulate that. Why will fail? Well, this, and this. Okay. So do you think then if we mitigated that, right, do you think it would work? Right? Because these might be legitimate reasons. It might be a personal experience that backfired. It might be you just don't like me, you know, or whatever. Those things are reality. But I embrace that. I mean, there's no reason why when you come up with an idea, why, particularly internally, why shouldn't we criticize it? How will this be different?
Yeah.
This. Well, this is this. Now. And the reality is when you gameplay those ideas, the reality is the kernel of the idea is brilliant.
What do you think about that? Like, how do you try and get your client along with the ride? Because obviously some of them might be risk averse. Some of them might have other ways that they want to go about managing things, or just their personalities or the way their business is. And you know there's a good idea and you want to let them know it's a safe place to experiment or to see, road test it without, you know, committing 100% to an idea. How do you make that? What do you think around that?
And again, this, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you a wishy-washy answer.
No, that's okay.
It's got to be a case by case, because it depends on, is the person a coach? You need to address, the way I would approach that, I need to find somebody who is open, because if they're closed as an individual, you're going to have a problem. It's a not made case syndrome. You also need to coach it in a language that's going to fix a problem you know they have. Like in my head, when you ran a company, you'll know that you had a list of problems. You knew people who had issues and problems, right? And sometimes they would be written down, and sometimes it's, you know, the people that over lunch back in the days when you could have lunch with people. Complain about chunks of their budgets being wasted, you know, operationally on overtime because they've got to do this and this. And you either write that down or store that in a mental note for another day. Yeah. And so what you want to do is articulate your solution or what you want to do to address a problem. And it might be obliquely, you know, like all this problem so I know you were complaining just before Christmas or whatever about you're burning a load of OPEX budget on overtime and whatever, but guess what? We're going to expand our service offering. And if we look at a service level agreement, I could take that out of the equation. You know, I could reduce that. Therefore, you pay me this. Yeah. If you're addressing it, otherwise, it's a blue sky conversation, and they're even harder. Have I answered your question? Probably not.
Yeah, I think, what you've said is it needs to be something that people care about, for starters. You know, and you need to have the right audience for the idea. And you also have to adapt your message to appeal to that person's style to kind of get the conversation rolling. So I think that's good advice. I think one thing that also is important when you're pitching an idea or when you're thinking about something and you're concerned about potential failure, obviously you need to prepare, plan, think about contingencies, but share that as well. Like don't pretend it's all grass, you know, no risk, no problem, not a care in the world. We can do this and there'll never be an issue. Better off to put it out on the table saying, look, I think this is a worthwhile opportunity or an idea or a process. Here's why I think it's worthwhile. But listen, just so you know, this could happen. I'm going to keep an eye on it. You know, and if it does, we'll nip it in the bud and we'll kind of reconvene. But don't want you to, I want you to be aware of that before we pitch in. And often, I think Jeff Bezos had that expression: one-way doors and two-way doors. And one-way doors are those you pass through from which there are no return, and two-way doors are those where you literally just hey, gave it a shot, go back and to the way that you can go back to the way things were. So I think thinking about it in those terms can help too. When you think, is this a two-way door? Like, what is the worst that can happen? We'll have wasted some time, maybe a bit of cash, and ultimately we can press the pause button and just, or even the rewind button and go back to where it was.
Even that, if you bring the customer with you, the account with you, there is success in that failure. We tried. We all tried as a team, and you know why it failed? Because their ultimate end user wasn't ready, or the timing wasn't ready, or the technology wasn't ready, or it didn't quite gel, and we didn't. But even that, and because even though that, again, the power to fail, the courage to try, we tried, it didn't work because their ultimate customer, the public, the government, whatever, isn't ready, right? But you know what? If we wait till X, Y, Z, and that idea will come back as governments change, as technology changes. You know, I benefit from that. 5-10 years down the line, the landscape's changed and something works.
I think just to sort of round out the conversation, there is a personal element as an account manager, and I guess anybody really, around failure, because with failure means you're stretching yourself, you're challenging yourself, you're attempting new ideas, strategies, needing to develop skills you didn't have in order to succeed. So
particularly now, particularly in the landscape that it's all remote.
Yeah,
it's a different. In fact, that, if I may, there's a different spin on this because you have to do all this remotely.
Yeah.
So I can't sit down with you now and whiteboard this, right? Yeah. We have to do with this, and it's a different skill set. It's a different skill set. It's even harder. You know?
I can't snatch the mouse from you and do it for you either. You have to do it yourself a lot of the time.
Or dramatically standing up in a meeting and say, I think there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Warwick. Can I just stop you? Walk to a whiteboard. I mean, it's a very dramatic thing to do, but say, what about this? What about that? And people go, ooh, how do you do that remotely? Without seeing the name say, it's very difficult. These are different skills and they're important.
And even the informal conversations, you know, where sometimes I've left a meeting, but then I've had to talk through it with somebody just for it to make sense in my mind, or I've had a conversation with somebody when I'm going through an idea, or I'll show someone a prototype. I'm like, look, I'm working on this dashboard. What do you guys think? And then they go, oh, yeah, oh, thank you. Those conversations are more difficult because they don't happen so organically now. You've got to make time and energy and remind yourself to have them.
Yes.
Because people don't overhear things. People don't hear you going, damn, this isn't working. You know, and then somebody runs over to your desk and goes, Warwick, what's wrong? Can I help? And you're like, I can't get this pivot table. Okay, here you go, click here. That doesn't happen so much, you know. So
that's true. Yeah, the frustration in the coffee room. Yeah. Where you sit in the corner and swear.
Yeah.
Warwick's having a bad day. I wonder, what's up? Well, this. What does this? Yeah. That's.
Or you get inspired by other people. You overhear them, and you're like, oh, I could do that with my client. What? Tell me more. People go about their business doing these sort of innovative things or creative things or think about things differently. We don't always share them. So I think it's important too that, as like you say, we're in this together, but also we're often alone in our Zoom rooms. But let's also remember that we could share some of the things that we're working on. Or the lessons we've learned from failure with our colleagues. Say, look, I tried this. This is working really well for me. This one didn't work so well, but hey, just a heads up to you guys. If you think you want to try it, I'd avoid this. You can have those conversations. So I think that's part of that fear of failure that will, or embracing failure rather, that can help make it easier as well. What do you think?
Definitely. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed I'm doing a lot more is I am finding excuses to talk to internal sponsors and my external sponsors a lot more. I'm used to, as an account manager, you were seeing your sponsors regularly, but I'm now putting aside chunks of a day or a week and finding the thinnest veiled excuse to ring them up and say, how are you?
Yeah.
It's a nothing excuse, but it's more a dialogue about and measuring where they are and more than you would normally. I don't know if it's for my benefit or for theirs.
Well, time slips by really quickly, and actually, that's a good point. I think I need to make some time for engagement. I have a lot of appointments, but they're about appointments are about things. They're not necessarily always with the people I should be talking to. Sometimes they slip into the background because I just am so busy sometimes. So I'm going to make some dedicated time for that, just outreach. People aren't as worried about failure as you are. You'll find often you go, I don't know if you've ever had this, you go to your boss and like, I wouldn't mind doing this sort of account plan thing. And you sweat it over the conversation and they're like, sure, go. Is that all you have to say? Like quite often it's not as, you've built it up to be something worse than it actually is.
Yeah, you've just reminded me of something that Arnold Palmer said, wasn't it? The more I practice, the better I get.
Yeah.
The single, and bear with me here, the more I worry about somebody or somebody, something, it's in my nature not to just worry, because if you sit and worry and you're not being productive, right? When I worry about something, I gameplay it, do the research. How about this? What about that? The more work I do, the easier those conversations are.
Yeah.
Every single time. And it never ceases to amaze me after 30 odd years. Still, the more work I put in, the customer says, yeah, do it.
Easier it gets. So any parting words on sort of embracing failure before we wrap it up?
I'm going to finish with a contentious statement. You're so surprised.
That's the way you roll. Bring it on.
Bring it on. I've been driven by failure my whole life.
Yeah.
Failure and the fear of failure drives me more than success.
Mm.
I don't want to, maybe it's a flaw in my personality. I didn't want to fail at this because it would let you down or your listeners. It would reflect badly on me and my company. So I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to be articulate.
Yeah. And
when analysing it, I think the things that have driven me to success have the fear of failure. I don't want to let myself down.
Yeah.
Not about the money. It's not about the accolades. Am I a sales guy of the year or person or whatever it is? They're transit and meaningless.
Yeah.
I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail. That's not success, failure.
Yeah.
Haunts me.
Yeah.
Scary, eh?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how you think, but fear of failure doesn't disable you.
No, it empowers me.
Yeah.
How can I make sure that this interaction works?
Yeah.
I've spent 2 or 3 weeks articulating this conversation. Some key points I wanted to do, some stuff that's close to me, referencing my father and my grandfather because I thought they were important and they were lessening. So I've done a bunch of preparation. I wrote some notes down and And if this was a formal thing in front of a customer, you and I would have practiced this presentation.
Yeah. Maybe have a couple of cute slides too.
Yeah, we'd have done it 10 times.
Yeah.
We'd have sat in an office somewhere and we'd have done it 10 times till we get it right.
Yeah.
And then we'd gainsay all their solutions and whatever. And guess what? It would be easy. That meeting would be so easy. After the third slide, they'd say, yeah, whatever, we're fine, do it.
Yeah, true.
So
I think, what I've taken from this conversation, and, this is, I think, a sort of a powerful mindset conversation that we've had, which is why I thought it was really great for you to share your expertise and just your point of view around failure. Because I think what you shared today and what we've talked about really just highlights that failure is actually a very powerful kind of resource that we can all harness in our own ways, whether that drives you to be more prepared, whether that drives you to achieve a certain result, whether that encourages you to be more creative. But when you flip it on its terms and you don't see it as catastrophic, you see it as something that can actually drive you in a creative, productive way. It's not embarrassing to fail. It's not shameful to fail. It's not anything that you should be beating yourself up about. It's actually something to embrace. and can lead to some amazing things. So do that with your clients, do it with your career, and do it sort of from a personal development and wellness at this point of view as well.
Absolutely. And it's a part of the human condition. You will fail. You will fail personally. You will fail professionally. How do you get up? How do you cope? How do we move forward? How do we move the debate forward? And it drives you forward, on so many levels.
Absolutely does. Well, thank you so much, Phil, for your time and being a return guest. I really appreciate it. And as always, you always share amazing insights. So thank you.
Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Well, what did you think? I was really inspired because for me, if you can try something new, if you can be innovative with your clients without the fear of recriminations, well, it's so liberating. I mean, who knows what great stuff you'll come up with if you embrace the fear of failure. Now, drop a comment below with your thoughts and check out my other interview with Phil on the 12 tenets of a key account management, which is by far the most popular episode of the series. And if you've got something to say and you'd like to be my next guest on Key Account Management in Action, send an email to hello@accountmanager.tips. Well, that's all, heroes. You know where to find me if you need me. And until next time, bye.